Dr. Bottrell.
Could I have that? I will be speaking from slides as well. Thank you so much, Chancellor Deaton, and to all of the BIFAD group here and the University of Missouri. It's a real pleasure, a real honor for me to be here, and I've enjoyed the Missourian hospitality. Integrated pest management. In view of the sake of time, I'm going to sort of cut out some of the stuff that I plan to talk about. But I do want to say a little bit about how integrated pest management works. I want to quickly go through a case history showing how it has benefited millions of farmers, specifically in rice in Asia. I want to point to the main, and I want to emphasize the main problem constraining long-term sustainability of IPM, and I want to suggest some priority research needs. Well, I think we know what integrated pest management is. Dr. DeLauder, I really enjoyed your presentation, and he covered a lot of stuff that I don't need to repeat. It's a workable strategy if put together. We try to draw, first of all, from what we call preventive methods, things that the farmer can do at planting time using disease, insect, resistant varieties, crop rotation, other good farming practices. And then every now and then, despite all of our good efforts, the bug will raise its ugly head and we have to zap it with a pesticide or some kind of an intervention measure. But primarily, we draw from renewable natural resources. I question why have an integrated pest management program and aid separate from sustainable agriculture, but that's a question. I think they are sort of one and the same in many respects. We draw from renewable natural resources with both. We have to understand the living system, which I will emphasize. We use judicious inputs of artificial inputs like pesticides and fertilizers. If we do these things, we achieve stability, environmental protection. Farmers first. The farmer can do things with minimal intervention in the future. Well, I want to now go ahead and view the time limit, talk about a case history in integrated pest management in rice in tropical Asia, which has been a well-publicized success story that's turned to be something less than successful in recent times. After the Green Revolution, technologies were introduced by the International Rice Research Institutes and collaborators. In the 60s, yields increased and things were looking so good for the Southeast Asian farmers. Until this ugly critter called the brown planthopper reared its ugly head, and I'm going to call it BPH, the brown planthopper, but it clobbered the new high-yielding varieties in the 70s. Some of us were there. Jim Litzinger, who is here today, and was one of the real chief players in sort of trying to turn this thing around. But it became a major problem, and if you were in Asia in the late 70s, you saw literally hundreds of thousands of hectares of rice that had been destroyed by this serious pest. Well, what happened? We learned, primarily through the good work of the International Rice Research Institute, that throughout Asia, farmers were applying insecticides prophylactically, all in good intention, thinking that this was the answer, that they could control the brown planthopper, keep it at bay, and prevent other pest outbreaks. But sort of the reverse happened. If you look at that graph, this sort of tells the story. It shows the relationship in the brown planthopper, which is shown in blue, a blue bar, and the good guys, I'll call them, the farmers' friends, the predators, the spiders, the other insects that fed on the brown planthopper. You notice there's a pretty wide ratio there. That the farmers really didn't need to use that insecticide. When they did use the insecticide, I'm going to skip that, they killed the predators more so than they did the brown planthopper. It became a monumental international problem. It is a migrant that can migrate hundreds of kilometers. And so it started increasing and it started spreading, and the rest of the story has been well documented. It was a significant constraint to the Green Revolution in rice in Asia. Well, in the late 70s, it was decided by donors. Initially, FAO took the lead. USAID played a major role, especially in Indonesia eventually. And Erie was the principal source of the science, so they providing the research information that fed into what became known as the Intercountry Integrated Pest Management Program for rice in Asia. Millions of farmers benefited from the efforts of Erie and from FAO. That's been well documented, no question about that. The greatest impact was in Indonesia. The Indonesian government banned some 60 insecticides known to worsen the BPH problem. They also stopped subsidizing farmers with pesticides, putting more of the onus of responsibility on the farmers' backs. Some 1.5 million rice farmers received intensified IPM training in Indonesia alone. What were the results? Throughout Asia, they were spectacular. Insecticide use dropped by 50 to 80% or more. The brown planthopper populations generally declined in non-threatening levels throughout the area. The farmers' crop yields, profits, and safety benefited. Outstanding success story. What is it that Mark Twain said in the Joan of Arc? It is human nature everywhere to deify success. We love success. We don't want to talk about the failures, but I'm going to be remiss if I don't talk about the failure here. Despite their success, these efforts weren't sustainable. Since 2005, the insecticide use has resurfaced as the primary tactic for controlling rice insects in tropical Asia. The brown planthopper and the related planthopper species, and there are others, have reached historical outbreak levels. That's despite this being the single largest integrated pest management effort in a developing country to date. What went wrong? I applaud L.M. Harris. She may be in the audience today. She's a student at VPI. She wrote this great thesis in 2011, and she concluded, although the amount of funding has been sufficient to develop IPM technologies and disseminate them to farmers during the duration of project cycle, the programs have lacked continuity and connectivity. So what happened in rice is this was such a successful story. All the actors, they went home. The funders left. The people that were trained in rice, they switched over to vegetables. So the brown planthopper came back. The pesticide industry stepped in. The marketing forces inundated all of rice in Southeast Asia. Here's what we're dealing with, folks. We're dealing with a monumental problem. This slide shows the number of farmers in the Philippines. These are guesstimates from Dr. Hale Young at Erie. 10 million rice farmers in Vietnam. Look at the extension workers and look at the ratio. And if you worked in Vietnam like I have, and others in the audience have, it's difficult to get the word out to farmers as it is. Well, I think we ought to change this. I think every developing farmer, instead of having an iPod, remember when old Steve Jobs would put out, I've got 1,000 songs on this little device. I think every farmer in the developing world should have an IPM pod. I don't know how we do this. This is a challenge. But instead of dealing with hundreds and thousands of farmers, we got to get to millions and millions of farmers. And we're not doing very good at it right now. So here I think here's the challenge, the main challenge. Also is we can tap into such innovative online courses such as Coursera now. Understand 3 million Courserians are now, that many have taken courses. Why not develop IPM courses in sustainable agriculture, etc.? where when the funders leave, at least there is the gap filled with these trained people. High priority research, I'm going to go over this very quickly. One thing we know for certain, we have learned, I think every IPM specialist in the audience today will agree, to manage a living ecosystem requires recognizing its actors, who the inhabitants are and their functions, below the ground and above the ground, and also along the natural environment, which often feeds the crops with pests and also with natural enemies, friends of the farmers. One of the I'm going to talk about the big picture areas of research now. One of the things that's woefully lacking throughout the developing world are trained taxonomists and ecologists who can help farmers identify what's in their fields and to explain their ecosystem functions. What can they do? And with the new molecular techniques, there are all kinds of opportunities here that we didn't have in the past for identifying organisms and providing information on diagnostics. Another thing, I hear this talk about, and I applaud Dr. Moon for talking about farming systems. We get stuck in the vegetable mode or we get stuck in the rice mode. I've never met a developing farmer who farmed one crop. We got to start thinking broadly in terms of farming systems and get off this funding projects aimed at vegetables or rice or other individual crops. We also have to understand how the natural environment, the aquatic system, the terrestrial system, and other crops feeds into the crop being managed. Finally, I want to talk about one of my areas of interest, metapopulations. Now, this may sound like academic pie in the sky stuff, but we know for certain that that pests are rarely, if ever, isolated. And there's this concept called metapopulation where there will be one subpopulation, one area that's occupied for years, and then it'll disappear. The pest will disappear. But we've got other subpopulations genetically connected will feed into it. So we have to understand this. We've done a terrible job in developing countries. I think aid can take a major leadership role. Why is that? We're dealing with so many migrant pests and pests that disperse and they go from one area to the other. And so I don't think that the people on the ground floor dealing with these pest problems would recognize metapopulation work as esoteric at all. And I just want to stress the big footprint that no IPM effort is going to pass the test of time if it fails to adjust to local cultures, politics, and opposing market forces. I think we have to, especially folks, be concerned about the opposing market forces. Pesticide industries, they're very good at getting the message out where extension people sometimes are more handicapped because of the limited infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Wow, Dr. Bottrell, thank you.